Heyo, everybody. Welcome to
Howdy.
episode 8 of the Beer Enthusiasts. And as we were saying before, we literally have a classic. It is on the label Rodenbach Classic, a classic example of Flanders Red. Chris, what do you got for glassware this time?
I went back to my, I got a little Jester King tulip kind of deal. So
Yep.
I almost reached for a wine glass, but, Jester King does a kind of a Flanders Red style beer. So I figured this is fine.
I have been waiting and waiting.
Hey!
Yeah.
Look at
This is one
that.
of this is one of the first pieces of like legit beer glassware. I think I got Teku's like when I went to the Alchemist in Vermont, and then I think this was the next one. Had this glass for quite a long
You listen
time.
to the cork pop? Rodenbach in cans. What a time to be alive.
I know, right? Yeah. So and it's not, and they don't. I don't think they condition these anymore either. I think it used to be. I think the older like bottles were bottle conditioned, but I don't think they. I don't think they do that anymore. So
Yeah, I don't know. We could probably find out, but I wonder as much as they make, especially of this, if they're not just pasteurizing it too to kind of lock in the acid levels that they want and all that good stuff.
that that's what I would think too. As we'll get into the profile, the acid is a big part of it, and it's for a lot of people this is teetering, or too much for some folks. But um, let's go to the recipe. The ABV is interesting. This can says 5. Other places it said 5.2. So maybe there's some allowable kind of variation in that. Had a very similar experience for IBU levels. I don't know if that's necessarily something that, well, they definitely, Rodenbach does not say that, but I've seen some places even as high as 30 IBUs, which, that's pretty high for the style in general. But this is a mixed fermentation beer. Even though there is sour characteristics, this is not a spontaneously fermented beer like other sour beers in Belgium. And it is matured in oak, but it's usually in these large foeders that some of them are. If you take care of oak really well, I mean, you can have it for like 100+ years.
Yeah,
You can just keep using it over and over, and they're so big, and that allows for longer maturation time, because it's such a large, or it's such a small amount of the surface area that's actually exposed to the oak and that slow oxidation process, that it's not going to oxidize as fast, even though it's already a slow process. The larger the barrel, the slower that the beer is going to take on those particular characteristics, and that is classic for this particular style. But when we move into like base malt and stuff, it's going to be Munich, it's going to be Vienna malt, and then from my understanding, it seems like, and this is just from there's a podcast episode by the Belgian Smack podcast. They do a episode called "Everything Oud Brew Flanders Red and Flemish Sours," and it's a roundtable with all the heavy hitters for these styles. And I'll put a link to that in the description. But one of the things it seems like is that the recipes are pretty heavy on crystal malt, and my guess is that that's sort of the unmalted wheat, kind of, for lambic, that's what they use for for crystal malt. That's what it is for Flanders. It's that kind of, yeast can't, normal brewers yeast can't ferment it, and so it's food for organisms later down the road. Not necessarily what they say outwardly, because unfortunately every time the guy from Rodenbach gets asked a question in that, he just says it's up to the brewer, and doesn't, and literally gives away zero information about the beer, which is unfortunate. But
yeah,
sometimes that's trade
it's an
secrets
interesting
are.
dynamic. Some Belgian brewers are simultaneously, willing to put anything into their beers and also cagey about telling you about it. So
Exactly. Yeah, hops for this, they're usually just going to be for bittering. If anybody were to ask me, I'd say if you've got stock of hops that you need to get rid of, just use that. You're not really looking for any flavor or aroma. And then for this one, it's it's traditionally blended. And that's kind of the big, when people say, there's Rodenbach Classic, there's Rodenbach Grand Cru, which maybe we'll do, sometime down the road. But the understanding is that the difference is that the blend of young to old beer, that ratio is a little different between the two. And so for this one, it's kind of a 3-to-1 ratio of young to aged beer. And then for Grand Cru, it is 3-to-1 in favor of aged beer. And then I believe for Rodenbach Vintage is just all some of their best aged beer stock that they kind of choose from all of their fooders. So that's kind of a breakdown of the. Did I miss anything on the kind of anything traditional on the recipe there?
No, I don't think so. I do think historically that they particularly, in between world wars and stuff like that, they would use other grains as well. Now, when you read the BJCP guidelines, they say corn is allowed, for example, but you listen to this roundtable podcast and they're like, no, we don't use corn anymore. So, that's, that probably had a little bit more to do with grain availability and, kind of like world political and agricultural stuff than it did with like corn is traditional. So really you're just looking at some combo Pilsner, some slightly darker malts. You can see that it is, there's nothing approaching like a roasted malt color. It's all, it looks like a deep dark caramel or like a browned honey. Is kind of what it looks like. So, we got darker malt character, but none of it seems like it's going to be roasty or chocolatey per se.
No. And you're moving us right into, sensory. So let's wait no longer. You kind of already gave a wonderful description of the color. There's this kind of, gearing towards like a very light tan, head. The bubble structure is really kind of tight, some small and medium bubbles. The clarity is pretty good. It's getting a little darker where it's just kind of hard to see because of the color, but you can kind of see, shapes. It's kind of got this translucence to it. But look at that. It's just getting this like beautiful, like ruby hues. It's almost just like a spectrum of ruby from the outside to the inside of the beer. That's just, wow. That is,
and in this glass, it's like an orb. It's just exactly. The way the light is hitting all of it is really, really interesting. But all kind of in that orange, red, super light brown, but a really bright version of that. The foam is more persistent than I remember. That's really great. Yeah. It's kind of a eggshell or very, very, very light tan color.
On the nose, there's one thing, and it's literally just a reminder of something that we recently had, but we a couple of times now when we've been doing our tasting practices with Charlie, we've been doing cheese pairing afterwards, but this to me smells like that orange fig jam that you brought. It is just like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this, because I was like, this has got orange, and I'm like, oh, it just smells like that. So orange fig jam for me is all over this.
Yeah, that's a really good call. It does, because it does smell like a combination of kind of deep dark fruit character, and there's some brightness too. There's something that's lemony, orangey, apple. There's just a really good
cooked red apple.
Yeah. The apple chips. They just make chips out of apple, and they make them out of red apple, and it's got like the skin still on the edge of the chip. It's what it smells like. It smells like it's almost got that tannic skin quality, which is, it's funny to say something smells like that because you can't really smell that per se, but it reminds me of eating a bag of apple chips.
Yeah. And one of the profiles that's usually, kind of somewhat of a hallmark for the style, the acetic acid character, very, very tame from my can. I don't know what you're getting, but I mean, very, very low, background note at most.
Yeah. A lot of people will smell, like a balsamic vinegar type note, and it's not really getting to that depth of an acetic acid note in the aroma. It's more like a really fresh cherry vinegar or something like that,
That's what I was.
that hasn't aged a long time.
Yeah, no, cherry is super spot on. I mean, if you're getting plums from this, if you're getting cranberries, cranberry jam, um, any sorts of those kinds of notes. I mean, you're kind of in the caramel. I'm getting a lot. With the lower acidity, I feel like I'm perceiving the sweetness a little more too. I'm getting a lot of like caramel brittle.
Dude, why is this so good?
This is incredible. This is a really good. This is a really good. I mean, I already know I was going to like this, but I mean, this batch is quite good. And on the palate, the acidity is like, this is ridiculously approachable.
Yeah, it is. It is so pleasant. I think that someone that's extremely skeptical about sour beer, you could hand them this, and
easy.
Anyone could tackle this in terms of acidity. It is so pleasant. It's just like having a squeeze of lemon on your dish or something. It is it just brightens everything. It's a flavor driver.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with all that, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that, all of that is transferring to the palate, and that restrained acidity just makes everything so perfect. It feels like everything's in place, right? You get your little pangs of caramel. There is a kind of like a toasty, bready thing in the background too. And then, all that fruit character, and it runs the whole gamut from a couple different kinds of apple to cherry to there's a little bit of like a cranberry kind of note, and another one too is like pomegranate. I think it's got a nice little pomegranate.
Really good. I think that's a really good call. I like pomegranate on that one.
But coming out of the gates with the orange fig jam, that's spot on. That's here. It's here to stay.
Well, where does this put you for food pairing then? This is a great, in my experience, this is a pretty great pairing beer. It's just got a lot of different aspects and kind of attributes.
Yeah, this is. I mean, we're talking about the balance of the acidity being so pleasant. That's great for food in this context because sometimes you get like a little older, sharper, more acetic acid, kind of balsamic-y vinegar character to a Flanders Red, and that can be delicious in its own right, but like a little bit more difficult to pair with food, right? Because it's just the intensity's higher. That's a tougher interaction when the acidity's really high. And so, gosh, the world's our oyster here. Oyster, pun intended, I guess. But I want to go with, anything that you would put like a cherry gastrique on, all the way from pork to gamier meats to fattier meats. That's going to be really great with that. But I'm going to throw the vegetarian curveball, and I want grilled radicchio, because radicchio is kind of bitter on its own. You grill it and you give some of that Maillard character that's a little bit different than what's in here, right? Because it's leaning more caramelly. And that the grilling kind of takes some of the bitterness out of the radicchio as well. And let's just make our cherry gastrique, and let's have cherry gastrique on grilled radicchio. And with this beer, I think that cherry is obviously going to be great with all the fruit character that's in the beer. This is not presenting super oaky, right? Because the balance is, or the predominant amount of beer that's in there is younger beer, so it hasn't picked up like a ton of oak tannin or other characters. But it is there. There's kind of this like light contour of oakiness, and so that's gonna, I think, be a really nice complement with the bitterness of the radicchio that remains after the grilling, and then you've got your grilled kind of like sulfury, cabbagey like vegetable that's really being tamed down by that really light acidity. That acidity is going to drive the other flavors of the cherry gastrique, etc. And so that's my savory. I want grilled radicchio cherry gastrique.
Yeah, I took a little bit of a inspiration from Rodenbach. They said they specifically um, like a tomato shrimp combo. I tried to look up what that was, and I couldn't really figure out what a tomato shrimp combo is.
Yeah.
But I found a recipe for something called shrimp saganak, and it's a Greek shrimp, and then it has tomato and feta. I think this beer with, I mean, if you're just putting this with just about any kind of softer acidic cheese, I mean, I think you're 90% of the
Yeah.
way there. And again, the base beer, again, you can, because in other, versions of Rodenbach, the acidity can just be on, the shoe can be on the other foot. You can bring stuff that's a little acidic, a little bit more of a, acidic cheese like feta, tomato, but then again, kind of just having all of those really, nice warm or bright spices that are in Greek spices. And again, I think if you're just taking, it's just really tough to kind of miss with too many proteins.
Yeah.
With this kind of flavor profile, it's really really tough. And then to me, that really has me again leaning kind of towards, I was thinking, a lot of people say Belgian triple is kind of the Thanksgiving beer that can handle everything. And I'm thinking, if that's gonna be for Thanksgiving, then give me this on the rest of the holidays with like a salted honey ham or something
Yep.
like that. I mean, it's that's the switcheroo for me.
Yeah, that any, we've talked about this in multiple episodes before. Anything that's got kind of like a glaze on it,
Yeah.
um, whether that's, honey baked ham or, playing around with kind of like sweet and sour um, preparations for meats and other dishes is going to be really, really good with that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think just the salt level, even if you have this or Grand Cru, you're either just going to get more malt boost in this one, or you're going to just get a nice little kind of subtle contrast from the salt if this happens to, or if you even have an aged version of this. These kind of beers age very very well. You could have something like this that's aged for a long time, and it's developed a little bit more of like an acetic character. Still, I think is going to be that's going to be a wonderful. The salt is just going to kind of temper that a little bit. Going to be a nice little contrast and just kind of make the old seem new again,
and
almost.
I like your call about, some of the brighter, spices and herbs and spices in Mediterranean food. I think this beer is a good canvas for herb and spice character, right? Because whatever oak tannins are like way in the back there, we can draw out with some like woodier type spices, but also, in many different types of cuisine, and we'll probably get to a little bit of spiciness in dessert, but kind of your cinnamons and your nutmegs and all of that, I think would turn this into almost like a mulled wine, or like a mulled cherry cider, kind of vibe, which would be a good pairing with with a lot of those dishes that have those spices. So that would be super fun. And these beers, they share a lot of affinity with wine and sherry in particular. And so thinking about having, what's the biggest disadvantage to pairing with wine? I think 1A is lack of carbonation in most contexts, right? So you've got that here. You got like a carbonated wine. 1B is a lot of the wines are heavy in alcohol, right? Even the lighter ones are 10, 11, 12%. And so this is 5%. And you get some wine impression, but it's just like more refreshing to the nth degree. And so the cutting and the cleansing power and the brightness is wine is no match here.
Yeah.
This
No.
is your new wine.
Yeah. What'd you come up with for dessert?
I wanted to lean into apples and do um, German apple cake, Abstellkuchen. And it's just kind of like a moist, dense cake that you kind of, you can mix in a couple of different kind of sweet tart apples in there, but you can also kind of glaze the bottom of the pan with a jam, like an apple jam or an apricot jam or something, and it kind of griddles, the bottom of the cake a little bit. And so you've
Yeah.
got some of that Maillard character that kind of
Mm.
crystallizes, caramelizes, and going to be so good with this. And there's a little bit of an apple note in here, so I'm kind of being a little matchy, but there's no darker fruit in that cake. So I think that provides a good complement to just baseline tart apple character. And this can, that's not a monstrously sweet dessert. It's kind of tart and sweet, but the cake part is like a, like a yellow cake, which is kind of a, I don't want to say a generic sweetness, but it can find a little bit of affinity with that, that toasty element that's way in the back of this beer, that bready, malty element, because really the balance of the beer is malt and fermentation character. And, in this dessert, we're getting a lot of things to pair with the malt, which is really nice. And then, that the fruit itself and the kind of glazed bottom of the cake match up with the fermentation character. So,
yeah, I think that's one reason why this beer lends itself so well to dessert, in that so many desserts are going to have, sort of the star of the show, whether it's the, the apple or whatever it is, if it's a pie, but there's always this like crust base, or, in the case of, my dessert, I went for like a dessert empanada. I wanted to go guava cream cheese. Become a pretty big fan of that combo in any sort of dessert that I can get. And again, I'm just going to be trying to find ways to pair this with cheese. I think it's just going to, like, just for people out there, just 101 fruity esters and cheese. You're most of the way there. I mean, there's maybe some other subtle things that you'll need to match up, but for the most part, that's just a really, really good affinity between beer and food. So again, that sort of really baked crust that you're getting on the outside, those Maillard characteristics, again, just drawing out some of those more subtle bread notes, while having plenty of other fruits, like you said, some things to add to a little bit to the complexity, and then, in my case, just really wanting to lean on cheese as kind of a canvas for all of those fruity esters to fall on.
Yeah, things that are like flaky, doughy, buttery, and have some fruit, it's going to be really, really great with this. It might be a little bit tougher with like really dense chocolatey desserts, because it might not be quite big enough. You obviously, chocolate and raspberry or whatever is good, but if you have this like really dense, fudgy, chocolatey dessert, this might not hold up to it. So I think of this as sort of it is really great with a lot of desserts, but the reason that we're pairing kind of fruit on fruit in some sense is it's such a bright beer. Like people think of, you look at that, you think it's going to be dark, ominous, and heavy, and it's really not. You could crush the whole pint can of this in record time.
Oh,
there's nothing holding you back.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about the chocolate. I think you've got to be really careful with what kind of chocolate you're choosing. I think once you start getting above, 70 might even be, kind of pushing it. But once you start getting there, then you're just kind of contrasting a lot because again, it sounds really good, right? Raspberry, chocolate covered raspberry, chocolate covered cherry, all these things sound really good. But when you kind of are not kind of matching or not having some sort of bridge at those sort of basic tastes, everything can just fall apart. Same thing. Yep. Again, if you're finding something like this more on the acidic side, if you just have something that's really sweet, the beer is probably just going to be tasting very, very acidic. So oftentimes, both in personal experience and from other folks, if something's got a little acid in it, you might need a little bit of acid from the beer just to kind of bring some balance to the pairing.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and I didn't.
Well, another super fun episode. Honestly, I didn't think I needed it, but another great reminder of how incredible this beer is. So still go out and find this. When I was looking for it, all the salespeople were telling me is that this doesn't sell well, and so they don't get a lot of it, and that's just a travesty. I hope that does not that trend does not continue. I hope that this continues to be something that we get here in the States, and if it's this version, all the better. So keep buying Rodenbach. Don't.
Yes, please. We promise to do our part, because it is. Yeah. It's even more delicious than I remembered. So, and this, I know for you, was kind of like a light bulb moment in beer, your first taste of the Rodenbach wine, and I think it is for a lot of people. because you don't really think beer can taste like this, and it's such a good bridge to other, variables in fermented beverages and stuff. And similarly, there are some bigger American craft breweries that are doing interpretations of it, and some smaller too. Obviously, they don't have the blending power of a Rodenbach that has just like a cavernous row of 600 hectoliter foeders or whatever they are. But the support the small batch ones too, because it's fun for people to experiment and get some of these callbacks to old classics and stuff. So keep drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the next couple of weeks, I want to give folks updates on what we're doing for our next episode. We're going to be doing Vanderginst, Rude Bruin, which is their Oud Bruin. So we're kind of sticking in the kind of Flemish sour family. And then I wanted to make sure people knew about the one we got coming up in two episodes from now, because not a classic example that maybe people will find on the shelf, but more of a kind of overall style that we're wanting to go over. We're going to be doing mixed culture beer, which I'm realizing we just did with this, but we kind of want to open it up a little bit more to, we're specifically doing Saison Bernice from Sante Adarius, but basically from your local craft brewer, if they're doing mixed fermentation, whether it's with something like Flanders Red or Saison or whatever, sort of the base beer is, this is your chance to your chance to support them, learn about a little bit more about mixed fermentation, and Saison Bernice is a particular favorite of both of ours. So obviously we're just looking for a reason to try it on the channel and talk through it and do everything that we do. So yeah, grab some of those, and Oud Bruin also, that too. Start looking now. Not the easiest style to find, but hopefully either you can find an import or find something that someone is making locally and taste it along with us. So
Yeah,
cheers, everybody.
cheers to that. Hopefully you can find it and join us in the coming week.